Who should you add before week 5 of the fantasy football season? What's going on, fantasy freaks and football fans? It's Mitch here, back with another must-add video. In this video, my top 10 targets on the waiver wire entering week 5 of the fantasy season. If that sounds good, spike the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to OwnersBox Fantasy for more fantasy football advice every single week. This video drops, so make sure to subscribe. And let me know in the comments if you have any roster questions, if you should drop a player for one of these players in this video. Let's begin with the most crucial position on the waiver wire this week, which is the running back position. And I'm going to begin with one of my favorite late round gems entering the season. It's taken him a little while to establish himself to the point to where people may have dropped him in your leagues, but I believe he should be owned in every fantasy league there is. As long as it's not a 2-team or a 4-teamer, this guy should be owned in all 10-team, 12-team fantasy formats. That is Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals. Currently rostered on about 61% of teams. So if you're in a shallow league, Chase Brown's probably available. Or like I said, if somebody got frustrated, you might be in a deeper league, they just dropped Chase Brown because he hasn't been super productive or useful for fantasy teams. He might be out there because this week he had a really productive week for the Bengals. 2 touchdowns. And he actually was the marquee running back, the lead back for the Bengals in this game. And over the past 3 weeks, Brown, every touch he has taken from that backfield, he has been explosive and dangerous through the running game and the passing game. One of the main features of Chase Brown's game is his speed, is his ability to break open runs in the open field, and is also his receiving skill set. I think Chase Brown has always been the better fit for this pass-happy Bengal attack because he's a better route runner out of the backfield. He can do more with less in terms of his touches than Zach Moss can. And if he's going to get some red zone carries like he did against Carolina, that's going to just boost his ceiling through the roof. So if Brown continues to see this type of usage, he's going to be at least an RB2 in fantasy moving forward. You're still going to have to deal with the unpredictability of who the main ball carrier is for the next couple of weeks, but it does look like Brown is gaining some steam and gaining some ground on becoming the RB1 in this Bengals backfield. And I don't think it hurts that this game where Brown was the main ball carrier and the main running back for the Bengals was a game that they actually won, right? They're 1-3 now. They actually did get a win in Carolina, and he scored 2 touchdowns. So Brown is showcasing his skill set now in this Bengals offense. Like I said, I think he's a better fit than Moss. And I think moving forward, this is a guy that I definitely look to add on my teams or maybe even trade for because he could be a great asset down the stretch because this Bengals offense looks dangerous and their defense not so good, which means a lot of points and high scoring affairs. So definitely add Chase Brown if for some reason he is available. The second target at running back should be more widely available. That's Kareem Hunt. He's owned currently in 36% of leagues. And honestly, man, I added Kareem Hunt in one of my leagues and didn't expect anything from him. Like, I thought he was going to be the Chiefs' number 3 running back. I thought we were just going to drop him after a week. But it just so happens that the Chiefs trust Kareem Hunt and they want him as their main ball carrier. In the first game with the Chiefs, he had 14 carries for 69 yards, 2 catches, and 16 yards. And honestly, like, I wouldn't have been too elated about even this workload if he didn't look so good. Like, Kareem Hunt looked good. He looked powerful. He looked quick. Like, he didn't look super fast. Kareem Hunt has never been straight line fast, but he looked like still fresh in the legs. Like, definitely a guy that we understand through his years in Cleveland and Kansas City, obviously understands the offense, but he can play on all 3 downs, which allows ultimate versatility and I think legitimacy to his role in Kansas City because he can pass block. He can catch the football. He's obviously great in short yardage because he's a big bowling ball of a back. He's one of those rare running backs that at his best combines power and also finesse in terms of his hands and pass catching capabilities, which is a rare combination, which is what made him such a good running back to begin with in the NFL. He's a little bit older now. He's not quite the same player, but in this offense that lacks a number 1 option, Isaiah Pacheco being injured, he could be legitimately the lead ball carrier, the lead receiver of this backfield. P. Ryan has not looked great. I feel like they may not trust the rookie quite as much as they trust Hunt in all situations, which makes Hunt a must-add and a top priority off the waiver wire. So Kareem Hunt, go get him, man. Definitely put in a nice bid for Kareem Hunt. At any point, if you can have a chief main ball carrier and the RB1 in that offense, especially with how their passing game looks without Rashee Rice now, they're going to have to run the ball a little bit more, you would think. That's going to make Hunt probably an RB2 and a startable asset in all leagues. Then you have Trey Sermon, who is a little bit of a less known commodity, but if you've been following the Colts closely, their depth chart, and you've been following handcuffs this offseason, Trey Sermon has been the Jonathan Taylor handcuff. He is only 1% owned, which in my opinion is outrageous considering the history of Jonathan Taylor's injury history, right? And Jonathan Taylor is once again injured here, and Trey Sermon should be a pickup for every league because all 5 touches that Jonathan Taylor did not have in that game went to Trey Sermon. Sermon also has a touchdown on the year in a previous game. And he's looked pretty good in Indianapolis the year previous. He was, I think, a 3rd-round pick out of San Francisco. He's got good power. He does operate inside that scheme pretty effectively for the Colts. And he can bring a 1st and 2nd down pure in between the tackles runner for the Colts. He won't be a guy that's really catching the ball out of the backfield on 3rd down, but I think in terms of a in between the tackles grinder that's probably getting 12 to 17 carries a game, that's effectively a starter, especially with this offensive line in Indy. Now Joe Flacco might be the quarterback, so definitely some more pass catching could be involved from the running back position from a guy like Sermon. So I think he's a great pickup across all formats. If you're in need of a running back for the next couple of weeks, I think Sermon is definitely a must add. And if you're the Jonathan Taylor guy, I think you should have already had him on your team. But if not, you should probably spend an extra pretty penny to try to get Sermon on your team just in case there's future injury, as well as him filling in for Richardson, or not Richardson, but Taylor, and Richardson's also hurt, but for Taylor in the short term. And then the last running back that I think is a must add is Tank Bigsby of the Jacksonville Jags. We've spoke about Bigsby before, and I love him as a handcuff, right? This is exactly why you should be owning handcuffs, especially when they pop in games. Like when you see these guys pop, I've brought up so many of them throughout the course of these must add videos because you want to add them before you have to add them. You understand what I'm saying? Like, you want to have Jordan Mason before you have to spend your entire fab budget on Jordan Mason, or that you have to have waiver priority number 1. Ideally, you don't because you're at the top of your league, right? So Tank Bigsby is only 12% owned. If anything at all happens to Travis Etienne, I don't care how bad the Jags are as a team, Tank Bigsby is a startable player in every league because he's a good player. He's a legitimately good player. He's explosive. 21 attempts, 172 yards so far this season. He had a long run against the Texans, and there has been conversation that he looks like the better pure runner this year than Travis Etienne. So if that conversation is already being had, that means work is going to slowly shift towards Bigsby and perhaps more of a closer to 60-40 split for Etienne to Bigsby. But then also, if Etienne goes down, which he did go down for a brief period in that Texans game, if he would have been out, Etienne, long-term with that shoulder injury, Bigsby would have been cash, like absolute money in fantasy, and he would have been going for a huge amount of the budget. So definitely add Bigsby now that you've seen the scare for Etienne. You know what's going to happen in Jacksonville. They don't have a 3rd running back that they like. So Bigsby is a must add. And I'm passionate about this one because I think that I almost didn't include him in this video because I've talked about him before, but he's a good player that you have to add. Wide receiver. Let's start with Xavier Legette, a rookie receiver out of Carolina. He's 14% owned, but he looked his most impressive in the first game without Adam Thielen, with Andy Dalton operating the offense against the Bengals. 20 targets, 12 receptions, 143 yards, and a touchdown so far this year. Had a nice game against the Bengals. And what I like about Legette is he's going to be out there in most 2 wide receiver formations. He'll probably be the wide receiver 2 for Carolina, but there's a couple different reasons I like him. They're heavily invested in him. Obviously, he was a 1st-round pick. They traded up to get him. Secondly, he's physically gifted. He's very fast. He's very big. He's very strong. and he can make plays down the field. He's explosive. He doesn't need a lot of targets to make things happen. Third, Carolina's not a good team, has a bad defense. They're going to be throwing a lot in these games, which raises the target volume and the attempts for this offense. They're going to have to score in games. And Dalton is actually pretty good right now. Like, he's playing productive fantasy ball for sure. So Leggett is definitely somebody that I could see being a wide receiver 3 for the rest of the fantasy season, given that Adam Thielen is seriously injured. Josh Downs is one of my favorite targets on the waiver wire this week because Joe Flacco could be the quarterback for at least the short term for the Indianapolis Colts. Downs, 20% owned, 11 receptions on 14 targets, 104 yards, and a touchdown. Downs is a legitimately good player. He's a good route runner. He's a good middle of the field target. And in things like reception perception, he's always stood out as a really effective separator. And he can be effective down the field or underneath. Joe Flacco is the type of in-the-pocket quarterback that would make Downs very valuable in fantasy and a very, very savvy pickup in PPR formats. I wouldn't be shocked if Flacco was like the Browns Flacco from last year where he takes over for Watson. What if he takes over for Richardson long-term? Downs could actually end up being a startable player in every league in PPR formats, in, those 3-receiver flex formats where you have to start maybe 4 receivers in a given week. Downs could be a valuable asset to pick up for sure, because I could see him leading this team in receptions potentially, or at least giving Michael Pittman a little bit of a conversation, because we've seen the upside with Downs. The concern has always been injuries for him, and then Richardson being an inefficient, inaccurate quarterback. But that all changes if Joe Flacco is in there, because he is a traditional pocket passer who is going to air it out and going to be aggressive. Dontavian Wicks is 14% owned, and he's the 3rd must-draft wide receiver. Wicks is a talented player that is basically a wide receiver handcuff for someone like Christian Watson, who went down with a high ankle sprain in the game against the Vikings. Now, he got absolutely destroyed. Jordan Love threw him a hospital ball, and that's what happens when you throw a hospital ball, Jordan Love. But Wicks is definitely somebody now that you have to own, because he's going to be in all 3 receiver sets for the Packers. He's a talented guy that has a little bit of everything in his game, from release package, route running, inside, outside versatility, size, quickness. He has proven that he can separate at the top of his routes, and he's been targeted heavily. 22 targets, but only 8 catches. Almost seems like a fake number. 104 yards. He has 3 touchdowns on the season, which means that he's almost becoming a red zone target for Jordan Love. He also dropped a touchdown in the end zone against the Vikings this past week, which would have increased his numbers and his attraction even more. But Wicks, I think, is going to be a pretty promising receiver, because I think he'll just basically take over for Watson's role. Watson was owned in every league, right? So Wicks should be owned as well. And this is, if you're at wide receiver right now and you're not too comfortable with your depth, I think Wicks is definitely somebody that I would look to pick up. Mike Williams is also a wide receiver I would look to pick up. He's 21% owned, and he's looking better and better and better with each and every game. He looked good against the Patriots. He looked even better against the Broncos. He led the Jets, I think, in terms of both receptions and yards, but definitely in terms of receiving yards. And I think the area that I'm most excited for Mike Williams is the red zone and also deep down the field. He is going to be the downfield target, the jump ball winner, the guy that goes up and gets it on 3rd down, the back shoulder artist, the guy that goes and wins that jump ball in the end zone for Aaron Rodgers. They need to express more downfield passing in this offense. It's been very limited, very short, very quick passing game. I think Mike Williams is a guy that needs to be added, because I think the Jets are going to realize that they need to operate more aggressively in the passing game, and that's going to unlock Mike Williams. Plus, in every game that he plays, we know how talented he is at his best. He was a great receiver, a 1,000-yard player with the Chargers, a first-round pick by the Chargers. He has a history of being legitimate. If he's truly back from his injury, he's a legitimately talented player that would be owned in every fantasy league. But on top of that, he's never going to be double-teamed because Garrett Wilson is on the other side, so he's not treated like a wide receiver 1 either. So that's also awesome. Now, those are the receivers and running backs. We're going to finish with 1 quarterback and 1 tight end. Baker Mayfield, if he's not already owned in your league at 66% owned, which is a high percentage, he should be owned. Now, actually in leagues, even the more competitive leagues, he's actually probably less likely to be owned, because a lot of people don't actually carry 2 quarterbacks in more competitive leagues, right? Unless you're in Superflex. But Baker Mayfield is somebody that should be owned in all formats and all leagues at this point, because he's basically a top 5 quarterback in fantasy right now. He has 984 passing yards, 8 touchdowns, only 2 picks, and he has 65 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. So he has 10 total touchdowns and 984 yards. He's popped off in 3 different games this year. He only had one kind of subpar performance against the Broncos. Other than that, Baker has been very effective. And with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Palmer, McMillan, Otton, White, and Irving, this passing offense is one of the best in football with one of the deepest cores of weaponry in football. And then if the offensive line gets a little healthier, that's going to only increase his production. So Baker, he also plays a pretty weak division. He's going to be in plenty of games due to the defense being a bit banged up, in and out of the lineup, a few of their different defenders, that he's going to be in games where they're having to score 30 points. He's having to chase from behind, or he's just playing really well from ahead because Godwin and Evans are making plays down the field. I love how aggressive this passing attack is. I love how Baker is being creative. He's able to extend. He's able to be accurate. He's able to be not only great on script, but also off script. He's willing to trust these receivers down the field and in tight windows. This is exactly the quarterback I want on my fantasy team because they're rather winning because of Baker, or they're trailing and they're having to come back, and they're going to trust Baker to get them back in games. So it's a lot like what the Brady offense in Tampa was. It's pass happy. They love to throw the ball. It's a different coordinator. It's a different system, but it's a similar build in terms of what they want to be as a team. They want to try to build leads through their passing game. They want to try to be aggressive on defense and cause turnovers and pressures and sacks, and they want to win that way. So Baker is a must add in fantasy. And the final ad, my 10th and final ad at tight end, Tucker Kraft of the Packers. Christian Watson's out. That means Wicks is going to play the wide receiver role, but that could also mean that Tucker Kraft sees more targets and more volume inside this offense. He has 12 catches, 130 yards, and a touchdown, and he was efficient with Jordan Love. So far in 2 games, he hasn't been too bad for fantasy purposes with Jordan Love, right? You have to look a little bit closer at the volume with Jordan Love and without Jordan Love, and Kraft is their number 1 tight end. He plays on pretty much most snaps, if not all snaps, for this offense. He's ahead of Luke Musgrave. He's a better blocker, but he's also really good in terms of yak situations. They like to set him up on screens. They like to get the ball in his hands and allow him to break a tackle or two. He's a bit of a red zone threat as well. And given that this is one of the best offenses in football, I want to get any target I can attached to Jordan Love and the Packers. And I think Kraft is certainly one. If you're desperate at tight end, I'd take a look at him, especially moving forward without Watson there to also soak up some volume. So Kraft is the final 10th ad of week 5. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, Gronk spike the like button. Don't forget to subscribe for weekly must-add videos, and let me know any questions you have in the comments section below. It's Mitch. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.